Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the MMA Corner News Show. As tonight we are coming at you live to give you the top news stories. Um, I don't know what to say. We got a whole lot to get into, but before we do, as always, this episode is brought to you by Battlebomb, the only pain reliever with the knockout power. Battlebomb.com. Check them out. Bony aside, go to the MMAcorner.com. Halfway down on the right-hand side, click on BTOR. All the bone USI products that you need are right there. I'm your host, Josh Davis, alongside my co-host, Jose Young. Jose, how you doing this evening?
I am fantastic. It's been a while since we've talked to the fans of the website, and there has never been a few busier weeks than we've had in the past few in this whole year. So it's going to be a pretty interesting episode today.
Absolutely, and we apologize for the break, but sometimes these things happen. Anyways, if you've been living under a rock today or work, whatever, just not paying attention, I understand how life gets in the way. I know mine certainly does sometimes. We didn't have the show last few weeks, but I digress. Cain Velasquez is out. That is right. Cain Velasquez is out. Uh, been replaced by Mark Hunt. The fight's going to go on. It's going to be Mark Hunt versus Fabricio Verdum for the interim title shot. All right, before I start rambling about this, because I have a few thoughts, Jose, give us your thoughts. What do you think about this?
This 2012, which was the year where pretty much every single person got injured. That was the year UFC 149 took place. That was a bad year in the UFC. And this 2014, which was going to be the year Lorenzo Fertitta came out and is like, we're going to hold 53 events and we're going to break into all these markets. We're going to hold events in Sweden and Ireland. We're going to go to Mexico. And he was all like Singapore when Fight Pass was launched. Like all these expectations for just these incredible fights were just all over the place in January. Now in October, we have lost, I think, 9 headliners, 9 pay-per-view headliners. Johnny Hendricks hasn't fought since I think March. Cain Velasquez hasn't fought since last October. Anderson Silva's been obviously gone since December. Chris Weidman has been injured twice. Vitor Belfort has had the TRT nonsense. Sonnen and Vanderlei have been that whole nonsense. This is the most cursed. Renan Barao pulled out of a fight the day of a fight. This is the most cursed year in the history of not just not just UFC, but mixed martial arts. And this is, I think, the biggest blow. This is for sure the biggest blow. Because, I mean, the whole reason they're going to Mexico is for Cain Velasquez. I mean, he has Brown Pride tattooed on his chest. He speaks Spanish. He was the coach on The Ultimate Fighter, the first Mexican heavyweight champion in any combat sport, not just mixed martial arts, and he's gone. He's not going to be there anymore. And this is, I think, this would be like if Conor McGregor pulled out of the Dublin card. That's how big of a deal this is. I mean, it doesn't, like, I can't even describe, like, it's obviously Mark Hunt is filling in, and everybody likes Mark Hunt. Everyone wants to see Mark Hunt fight for the UFC title. It's an exciting fight, but man, Cain Velasquez has had 5 fights in 5 years, 4 years, something like that. So injury bug strikes him again, and those knees of his are just sapping him of his prime years. So this is probably one of the most devastating injuries the UFC has seen in a very long time because of who it is and where the fight's going to be.
There are a lot of things on this. First, let's touch on Cain. You bring up a good point. His knee troubles, his shoulder troubles, his body certainly isn't what it should be, or maybe his pain tolerance isn't what it should be. Because not that I want to say anything bad about Cain, and I'm certainly not trying to, but take a look at his training partner Daniel Cormier, who's been fighting for years with no ACL or MCL. The guy just deals with it. And even now, he's like, no, I'm not having surgery. I'm going to whoop John's ass with a broken knee. So essentially kept proved that by whooping JDS's ass twice. Uh, but other than that, let's be honest, he hasn't done it. He hasn't fought. He's been in scenario that we have with Kane. Now, obviously, yes, he's going to Mexico. Obviously, Gilbert Melendez really wanted to be on that card, Diego Sanchez, so on and so forth. But Cain Velasquez is the draw. Cain Velasquez is the reason why they were thinking they were going to sell out this huge stadium in Mexico. And now it's Mark Hunt. While I believe that Mark Hunt has probably earned a UFC title shot, the guy's a beast. All he does is find ways to knock people out. However, does he? I mean, how does he match up against Fabricio? It's interesting. Can he knock Fabricio out? If he connects, he certainly can. But you know, I think a more exciting fight, just from my perspective, I would have liked to see Stipe in there. Now, obviously, he's got a fight booked, but you know, it's one of those things. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So let me ask you this. Give me your thoughts on the fight, not the situation, just the fight. Can Mark Hunt go into Mexico, coming off his big victory over Roy Nelson? Can he go in to Mexico and beat Fabricio Verdum? And you know, what's Verdum thinking? The whole time he coached against Cain on the show. He was expecting to fight Cain. He's been training for Cain. He wants Cain. And now he's fighting now he's fighting Mark Hunt. Give me your thoughts on just this fight.
Well, the one thing that you said, first of all, I just want to say you want to see Stipe fight Verdum, and he has a fight lined up with Junior. Think about what Junior Dos Santos must think. He obliterated Verdum with an uppercut and obliterated Hunt with a roundhouse kick. These two guys, he knocked unconscious. And now he obviously has to take a back seat to that, and he's easily the second best heavyweight in that division, in my opinion. But regarding this fight, I think the big thing that people aren't really discussing is, if people don't remember, Mark Hunt was like 290 pounds before his fight with Roy Nelson, and he had to cut almost 30 pounds in 2 days just to make 265. He only has 3 weeks to prepare for this fight. From what I heard from ESPN, he's about 310 pounds right now. So he has to cut maybe 50 pounds in 3 weeks to get ready for a fight with Fabricio Verdum. And Fabricio Verdum has been in Mexico for like 2 months training. Mexico City has an altitude of 7,382 feet. Mark Hunt trains out of Sydney with an altitude of 62 feet. So Mark Hunt has 3 weeks to cut almost 40 pounds and prepare for a fight that is almost 77,400 feet in difference of altitude. So he's going to need that knockout in the first round, because if he gets out of the first round, it is just straight downhill, because I can't imagine Mark Hunt will have enough time to prepare. And yes, he did win the K1 Grand Prix, so to say Mark Hunt has a puncher's chance is a little bit of an understatement, because no one had ever knocked out Roy Nelson before. Dana White has said time and time again, him and Roy Nelson do have their issues, but Dana White always says Roy Nelson has a chin of granite. And Fabricio Verdum couldn't knock out Roy Nelson, and he battered him for 15 minutes. Mark Hunt just had a walk-off knockout with an uppercut. So Mark Hunt obviously does have a puncher's chance, but Fabricio Verdum's stand-up, he completely picked apart Travis Brown for 25 straight minutes. And when everybody said Travis Brown's biggest strength was on his feet, and Fabricio Verdum would have to bring it to the ground if he was going to compete. Well, he did get knocked out by Junior Dos Santos. That was at UFC 90 or UFC 91, way back in the day. He's with Rafael Cordero at King's MMA now, so his stand-up has grown leaps and leaps and leaps and bounds. So he does have the tools to. He obviously doesn't have the power of Mark Hunt, but he does have the tools to stay away from that knockout power. He does have the reach advantage. I believe he has the height advantage, so if he can keep Mark Hunt at bay from landing that looping hook that he plastered Stefan Struve with, or the uppercut from Mark Hunt, or even those punches he got Junior with in the first round, if he can keep him at bay for at least 1 or 2 rounds, I think Fabricio Verdum can either cruise to a finish, or he can, if I was him, I would just take this down and submit him. Because, I mean, Alistair Overeem submitted Mark Hunt with a key lock. And that's not a normal lock you see in a mixed martial arts fight. Alistair Overeem is on the record saying he's never tried that. He's not even tried that in a fight, and he submitted Mark Hunt with a key lock. And yes, that was back in the Pride days, so obviously they've gotten a lot better. But Fabricio Verdum, I believe, is the best jiu-jitsu practitioner outside of Damian Maia in the UFC. So I see Fabricio Verdum winning, but Mark Hunt absolutely has a puncher's chance in this one. It will be exciting.
Well, there's no question he has a puncher's chance. And yeah, knocking out Roy Nelson, while Roy is not the best fighter out there, he arguably does have the best chin. And one guy you didn't mention, and just battering Roy Nelson but unable to finish him, was Junior Dos Santos. And JDS landed, seriously some Mike Tyson punch-out style uppercuts on Roy Nelson, and could not drop him, couldn't finish him, and obviously Mark Hunt does have that power. So if he connects, it's going to be lights out. The altitude thing, I had the privilege of watching Mark Hunt fight in Denver, and obviously it's a mile high here. And by the end of the fight, he was totally gassed. There's no question. And a lot of people were complaining about his fight with Ben Rothwell, and how these two were totally gassed at the end, and Ben Rothwell was essentially just holding on to his shorts, could barely stand up. And on my radio show here in Denver, I had to point out that these are two 300-pound men at altitude, swinging sledgehammers. You go out and do that, tell me you're not going to get tired. I do think that fighting in Mexico City at altitude with only 3 weeks to prepare, and again, like you pointed out, having to drop all that weight, if this fight makes it into championship rounds, I mean, seriously, if we're just being honest, what's he going to have to offer in, minute 20, minute 23? I mean, I can't really see it being much, So it'll be interesting to see how the fight plays out. Obviously, as you pointed out, the worst thing that could happen for the UFC this year. But the UFC's proven to be resilient. They didn't cancel this event. They didn't cancel this main event and try and throw some other crap in there. They gave us a fight that really, I think, in a lot of ways is pleasing the fans. You don't hear anyone out there saying Mark Hunt doesn't deserve this. And so while I say I would have loved to see Stipe in there, Hunt does deserve this. Now, you brought up JDS, and I want to touch on that real quick. My thought is the only reason JDS didn't get this fight is because Cain Velasquez has already beat him twice. They fought 3 times. He's 1-2. Nothing's changed other than Cain can't stay healthy. It makes me think that JDS is going to win that fight. Again, I think Cain's able to take him down and beat him up like he did, the previous 2 fights, or just beat him up on the feet, whatever. So I think that's probably the UFC's thinking, because I agree with you. I think there's no question that JDS is the second best heavyweight in the world right now. The problem is he's already lost to the best heavyweight out there twice. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on that. On to us. What else is news?
I guess the other big news of the week was also today, because Tuesdays can be a little slow in the UFC. It's in the middle of the week. Usually they put out the bad news on a Tuesday. They don't, or they announce like the undercard fights. And today, this morning, it was revealed that the UFC has rescinded their 12-month suspension of Kung Lee after he tested positive for HGH following his TKO loss to Michael Bisping. And that obviously seems like it was going to be the big news of the week until Cain Velasquez's knee decided to give out on him yet again. This is a little surprising. The UFC has never really, I can't think of one instance the UFC has gone back on a suspension. And that's that same card. I believe that's the same card that Dana White pulled the judge in the middle of a fight for
Yeah.
for, and Dana White came out and apologized for doing that, and that was a shocker. And this is an even bigger shocker. The UFC, Kung Lee's argument was there was no second test. There was no like B sample, from what I believe. I guess the test maybe changed hands a few times. And he said that the elevated levels of HGH were just natural. Like if you fight for 20 minutes, your human growth hormone is just naturally going to increase at some point in the fight. And he failed the eye test going into the fight because he was like, he's 40 something, and he looked more shredded than when he was like a 25-year-old karate fighter or martial artist. So he failed the eye test, and when he failed the HGH test, everybody quickly was like, "Told you so! I told you so! Just look at it. He's 40 something, and he has never been in that good of a shape." But he argued where there was no sample B, and nobody wanted to listen to him because of that photo. If nobody's seen the photo, there was that one of him like flexing after he got off the scale. And he looks inhuman. He looks like an action figure. And he said, "Oh, it was just the lighting, and I was flexing after getting out of the pool or whatever." And nobody believed him. He failed. Nobody believed his arguments, and the UFC rescinded the suspension. I still feel bad for him because he's still gonna have that label of you failed the test, regardless of the UFC taking back the suspension. And I don't even think them taking the suspension back was that big of a deal because before he fought Michael Bisping, the last time he fought was like 2 years ago, like 2012. So this is a guy that takes 2 years off between fights. A 12-month suspension isn't that big of a deal to him, I think. Well, it obviously is in his mind for his pride, but 12 months of no Kung Lee is nothing. Like, fight fans aren't going to be banging on the door for more Kung Lee because he's probably going to have to take time off anyway after he got that beatdown from Michael Bisping, but this is obviously big news. The UFC has never done this, and I hope it opens more. It not opens more doors, but the UFC will do that B sample next time, or they'll take a better approach than just immediately throwing the book at future fighters that this happens to.
I have to agree. Something needs to be done by the UFC related to that. However, if I'm just being honest, yes, I think absolutely was doing some stuff that he shouldn't have been doing. Age testing. And yet here they are claiming that they're testing for it, and he comes out positive. Well, that's garbage. And I think the UFC not only should have lifted the suspension, but they should be taking issues within themselves because they talk about how they regulate and do all this drug testing overseas when there are no commission. I think really they should be looking at themselves and, again, taking issue with the fact that they made a mistake here. They used a company that didn't know what they were doing to handle a main event test like this. That's on them, not on Kung Lee. Was Kung Lee yoked up? We'll never know. Do I think he was? Absolutely. I mean, come on. To see that kind of transformation, at his age, I certainly think he was on something, but it's irrelevant. He got his ass whooped. Why is it that big of a deal? I mean, if you really think about it, like you pointed out, he very rarely fights. He went in there, he got the shit beat out of him. Who cares what he was on? He's not going to be he's not going to be fighting for a title anytime soon or anything like that. So, like I said, let's just move on. Forget about Kung Lee. Forget about his suspension. If he comes back, it'll simply because the UFC fixes whatever issues they're having in China. They get that stuff worked out. They need him as a superstar over there. Other than that, he's probably going to go back to acting. So kudos to the UFC for doing the right thing, but in the grand scheme of things, not really that big of a deal.
And I do want to stress
Do
that
you disagree?
I do want no, I agree with you everything you said, but I do want to stress for those viewers or listeners that are tuning in that just because they rescinded their suspension does not mean Kung Lee is innocent. It just means that the UFC and the testing facility messed up and they didn't do the B sample. So just because Kung Lee is the suspension is rescinded does not make Kung Lee innocent. He very well could have used HGH, or he very well could have not used HGH. And you said it best. There's no way to know now, and we just have to move on because it's in the past. It's like in court, the lawyer messes up and the case gets thrown out. That's it. Your client could be guilty, but the other guy messed up. So just move on. But he's not innocent and he's not guilty. Just it's like nothing happened. He just lost. He got beat down.
And that's always going to be how I look at it. Will I always remember that there's this taint over him? Absolutely. But when I think of Bisbane and Kung Lee, I'm going to think of the one-sided ass whooping that I watched. As simple as that. A lot of fighters have tested positive over the years. I cover the sport. I've written articles about these fighters testing positive. Can I name everyone that I've listed? Absolutely not. Because in the grand scheme of things, if they're not cheating to win titles, I don't care. It really doesn't matter to me. You know, if they cheat and get their ass whooped, who cares? There is another piece of news out there. Didn't happen, but I do think it's news. What kind of news? I got to be honest, I don't know. It could be legitimate news that's going to have great ramifications for the promotion, or it could just be some BS PR stunt that promotions do all the time to try and gain ground against the UFC. What I'm talking about here is Royce Gracie joining Bellator. First off, anyone who follows the sport has to know who Royce Gracie is and what he's done. And Royce will tell you himself, he built the UFC, and I got to be honest, he did. I was there. I watched it. Saw it in person, live, McNichols Arena, UFC 1 and 2. This little man came in and whooped ass on everybody. He really put the sport on the map. Joining Bellator. So let me ask you this, Jose. First off, is this really anything, or is it a PR stunt that doesn't mean crap? And if it is something legitimate, what do you think Royce brings to Bellator these days? What do you think Royce is going to be able to do for Bellator that the UFC didn't think was good enough for Royce to come work for them?
Well, this is absolutely something. I mean, because obviously this is the 5th UFC Hall of Famer that's now working for Bellator, and the other 4 are Tito Ortiz, Stephan Bonnar, Randy Couture. I guess it's Ken Shamrock, and now Royce Gracie. So, but the 3 of those, Ken Shamrock, Randy Couture, and Tito Ortiz, have all had issues with Dana White. Like, not just like, I want more money. Like, they have come out and said they hate Dana White, and Dana White has come out and said, I hate these, or I don't hate these guys, but those guys are relevant in my life. He does like Stephan Bonnar. He released Stephan Bonnar just so he could, quote, kick Tito Ortiz's ass. Well, Royce Gracie joining Bellator is like, I don't even know. That's like, to put it in baseball terms, that would be like Pedro Martinez becoming the manager of the New York Yankees. That is just that, like, you would never think that would happen. Royce, like you said, Royce Gracie is the original UFC fighter. I think he won 3 of the UFC tournaments. He has 10. He's one of the few people who have 10 wins in the UFC. He has like the most submission wins in the UFC. He's in him tapping out Ken Shamrock is the first thing you see in the pay-per-view opening montage. He is not the poster boy of the UFC, but he is the poster boy of the dark ages of the UFC when the sport was a quote blood sport. So this was a huge shock to me. He obviously wasn't under contract with the UFC. The last time you saw him working with the UFC was the 20th anniversary, which I was at UFC 167, where he did the Q&A with all the other legends, and he did some autograph signings and he shook hands and everything, and that's pretty much what he's going to do at Bellator. So now he gets a merchandise deal with Bellator as well, which is probably another thing that piqued his interest. He's going to be doing seminars, which he already does. The UFC obviously didn't help fund his seminars. He did it under the Gracie name. Bellator is going to help fund his seminars. He's all over the place. He's going to be a Bellator brand ambassador. He came out saying he's not a Bellator fighter. He will always be a UFC fighter, and he's just going to help spread mixed martial arts. It doesn't have to just be the UFC, he said. Well, he is loyal to the UFC, in his words. He wants to first and foremost spread the Gracie name and the mixed martial arts sport to the world. And Bellator gave him a huge opportunity by funding a lot of his seminars with the clothing deal, a lot more autographs. I guess the UFC just didn't think is more into the sport, it seems like, where they're more interested in putting on the fights everybody wants to see for competitive sake. And the Bellator has Bobby Lashley, who could very well be a viable fighter, but is also the TNA heavyweight champion in professional wrestling, is co-main eventing fights. And they have Stephen Bonner main eventing a fight, while there's also a championship on the same card, but it's in the co-main event. So Bellator is doing the same thing Strikeforce did, where they put on all these fun fights, like money-making fights. Like, I don't want to say freak show fights, because Tito Ortiz and Stephen Bonner are viable fighters, but that shouldn't be that would be a third fight on a UFC card. There's no way Stephen Bonner versus Tito Ortiz would ever main event a fight, not even a Fight Pass card, not even a Fox Sports card. And they're headlining a Bellator card while there's a championship on the same card. So Royce Gracie to Bellator shocked me, because I never ever when Royce Gracie left to go to Pride, it was because he wanted to fight like Sakuraba and everybody, and then he did fail the drug test. But him going to Bellator is a huge surprise to me. But I don't think this would have happened if Scott Coker wasn't the president.
Well, and honestly, excuse me, I'm not 100% sure still what to think about this. Hoist doesn't need any help with his seminars. He comes to Colorado a lot to do seminars. Actually, he has several affiliate schools out here. Anyways, I've been to a lot of his tournaments, or a lot of his seminars. They're always no BS, 500-600 people deep. I mean, these things are jammed. He has no problem with his seminars. There's no issue there. So either that in so many other ways. There's something to Bellator. So we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But in the end, I think right now it's good for Bellator. It's got a lot of people talking about it. I know I'm excited to see what they're going to do, and I'm looking forward to going to my next Bellator event to see if I can ask him exactly that. But again, we'll have to wait and see how everything plays out with this. But I do think that it's a great step for Bellator. And one of the things you pointed out to, or alluded to, freak show. I don't know. Bellator's put on some freak show style fights, but I think they do it in a very tactful manner. They don't try and make it out to be anything it's not. They flat out tell you, hey, this is a fight that we're putting on for this reason. It is because that's what the fans ask for. It is because we know it's going to sell and make money, or it is because it's simply a freak show. Look at these two guys. And so is Bonner and Tito a freak show? No, but I don't think they're viable fighters anymore. Obviously, the UFC would never put on this fight. They had years of opportunities to do it, and it's not anything that they really ever even entertained. And now it's the main event. I think again, Bellator's doing this because it'll generate views. Uh, Bonner's a trash talker, so is Tito. Tito thinks he still can be a champion. Bonner just wants to punch Tito in the face. He knows that he's no longer a fighter. He wants to do roids and beef up and flex in front of the mirror and look cool. There's no question about that. And he fully admits to it. So uh, he's doing this fight because he wants to hit Tito in the mouth. And I think anybody that wants to hit Tito in the mouth, kudos in my book. I'd like to hit Tito in the mouth. Not that I don't, respect Tito. I do, but I mean, look how big his head is. I would love to punch it in the face.
It's a pretty big target.
It is. All right. So what else is news out there?
Another word coming out is the UFC might bring their first big Fox card. When I mean Fox card, I don't mean Fox Sports 1 or Fox Sports 2 or those FX cards back in the day. Like the big Fox card, like NFL on Fox, like that Fox, might be going across the pond and host an event in Sweden. When the news out, according to MMA Mania, I'll give them a shout out for breaking the news, is Alexander Gustafsson versus Rashad Evans is in the works for the main event. Originally, they wanted Gustafsson versus Anthony Johnson to main event the Phoenix card, but obviously Anthony Johnson is going through that whole domestic assault thing and is on indefinite suspension, and I honestly would not be surprised if he never fought in the UFC again, based on the sporting world's views on domestic assault right now. But this would be, I think this is the perfect fight for both of them. Rashad Evans hasn't fought since fighting Chael Sonnen at UFC 167, beating him the way everybody knew he was going to be in the first round. Alexander Gustafsson was supposed to fight John Jones in the big main event at UFC 178. Obviously, he got hurt, and then John Jones got hurt. So Daniel Cormier and John Jones got pushed to January. And if Daniel Cormier beats John Jones, it's already known that John Jones will obviously get an immediate rematch like Anderson Silva did, like Renan Barão did. And that probably won't be until, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they put that on the 4th of July card if DC wins. Make that the rematch on International Fight Week. So if Alexander Gustafsson wants to sit out until his title shot, that could very well be late 2015. And I don't think he wants that. People will forget about him. Yeah, that fight with John Jones was amazing, but that was more than a year ago. Right now, two and a half years later, people will not be over it, but you never know what it's going to happen in that span of time. So Gustafsson needs to stay relevant. It would be a main event, a 5-round main event in his hometown on Fox for the whole world to see. And he'd be fighting a top 10 fighter, former champion like Rashad Evans. Everybody else seems to be booked up. Rashad Evans obviously is a former champion, coming off a win, and he needs to get back into the title picture. And defeating Alexander Gustafsson, the number 2 light heavyweight, is the perfect fight for him to do that. So I love this fight. I think it'll be competitive, and I think it's the perfect fight for both men, especially in Sweden.
Oh, I think this is a terrible fight. I think it's horrible. And I got to be honest, I don't know what the UFC is thinking here. This could play out so horribly for the UFC. All right. So let's say John Jones beats Daniel Cormier. All right. Who's a legitimate contender for John Jones at light heavyweight? Who is a marketable contender for John Jones at light heavyweight? Let's go down the list. Like I said, he just beat Cormier. You've got Rashad Evans. You've got Glover Teixeira, Anthony Johnson, who, again, like you said, is indefinitely suspended. Then at number 6, you have Phil Davis. Then you're getting Ryan Bader, Dan Henderson, Shogun Hua, Ovin St. Preux to round out the top 10. So I'll ask the question again. Who do you have as a marketable contender for John Jones?
I would take Rashad Evans or Alexander Gustafsson are the only 2 marketable fighters for outside of Daniel Cormier.
Well, I will say there's one. I will say there's Alexander Gustafsson. I don't think Rashad Evans is a marketable fighter for John Jones. John whooped him flat out whooped him. Could have finished him any time after he started landing those short elbows in the third round and had him doing the stinky legs. He could have finished that fight at any time. He took it easy on it. He showed a lot of mercy. Should have finished that fight. Rashad did absolutely nothing in that fight to give me hope that that's a fight he can ever win. And since then, he's not shown any kind of improvement that lets me think that he's done anything to improve to be able to win that fight. I don't think it's a marketable fight. I think the only marketable fight outside of Daniel Cormier for John Jones defending his light heavyweight title. Now, if he moves up to heavyweight, like I think he should, whole different story. But in light heavyweight division, defending his title, the only other marketable fight out there is Alexander Gustafsson. And if they keep screwing around, they're going to piss that away too. Because like you said, people eventually are going to forget about it. You know, the human brain only remembers so much, and it's terrible. So let's say that Alexander Gustafsson loses this fight. John Jones wins. People are not going to be shouting, hey, let's do Rashad Evans, John Jones. I mean, Dana White's going to try and force it down people's throats because that's all he has. But for this fight, really, the UFC needs Daniel Cormier. It doesn't matter. Gustafsson versus Cormier, great fight. Gustafsson versus Rashad Evans to each other would be a solid fight. But Rashad versus John Jones, 99 out of 100 times, you know. So I don't know that that's going to do big money. I don't know that John Jones will take that fight. You know, he'll probably say if Phil Davis beats, you know, Glover Teixeira, you know, John will probably be saying Phil deserves the next title shot. So you really think Rashad Evans versus John Jones too is a good fight?
Well, so I think the only reason they would want to put Rashad Evans versus Alexander Gustafsson as the headliner in Sweden is because I guess from the numbers out of the last Sweden card were very disappointing, especially because Europe is obviously, like, last year was the year of, like, Canada, and the year before that was the year of Brazil, and this year I feel like it's been the year of Europe, and next year was supposed to be Mexico. So this year you've had this explosion in Ireland and the explosion in Sweden. Headline, like, obviously Conor McGregor and Alexander Gustafsson have been the poster boy for European MMA, and they need a fighter they want Alexander Gustafsson to main event a fight in Sweden. That's obvious, and they need a fighter that is viable, as in you can sell Rashad Evans as a former champion, defeated Chuck Liddell, defeated like Tito Ortiz, and he's beaten UFC Hall of Famers, but he's obviously on the tail end of his career, as you said, and he hasn't shown improvement. So Alexander Gustafsson should come in as the favorite, and he should beat Rashad Evans. And they want him to beat Rashad Evans in Sweden. So they need a fighter that he can beat, but a fighter that is viable to sell. And I do think Rashad Evans versus John Jones would be a pretty good. I don't think it would sell nearly as much because the last one I think sold 700,000 pay-per-views, which is unbelievable in today's standards. I can't imagine it would do better. But John Jones has said that Rashad Evans was his Frazier, and that does hold water when in combat sports call somebody their Frazier. So I don't think it would do better sales, but I don't think John Jones would turn it down because I feel like him and Rashad Evans would love to fight each other again. They did have some pretty heated words back in the day. So I do agree with you that Alexander Gustafsson is the only legitimate marketable fighter, but I do think Rashad Evans you can market is the only person outside of Gustafsson and Cormier that you could say that you could market because they do have history. They were training partners, and Ryan Bader never trained with John Jones. Dan Henderson was supposed to fight John Jones, but then he lost 3 in a row, basically. Phil Davis got smashed by Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson's obviously has his own problems, but Other than that, other than Gustafsson and Cormier, the only person you could say even has even a small amount of marketability is Rashad Evans. So I do think, like what you asked, I do think Rashad Evans and John Jones could be very marketable.
Well, you bring up a ton of valid points there, and again, yeah, there's really, if Gustafsson loses, in my mind, the UFC's kind of screwed unless Cormier beats Jones. However, take Rashad Evans out of the equation with Anthony Rumble Johnson being suspended. I mean, it's freaking terrible for the UFC because there's no other fighter for Gustafsson either. If they're going to do an event in Sweden with Gus as the main event, they really didn't have any other option. But again, like I said at the beginning of this rant, if Alexander Gustafsson loses this fight, it could have significant negative ramifications for the UFC. However, as we all know, the UFC doesn't care what I think. If I did, I'd be employed by the UFC. And I'm not. You know why? Because, again, they do not care what I think. So it's just one of those things. All right, let's move right along. I know there are a couple other news stories out there, a couple of fights broke. So, Jose, what do we got?
I guess the two biggest ones are Uriah Faber is fighting Francisco Rivera, which is very strange, and Renan Barão is going to be the co-main event at UFC Fight Night in Brazil, which is the CB Machida main event, is fighting Mitch Gagnon, the Canadian bantamweight who just fought in Halifax and is kind of been flying under the radar as not a world breaker, but he's put together a few wins. So those are the two biggest fights I believe that were broken, and obviously Henry Cejudo is scheduled to make yet another UFC debut, and we'll see if he can make bantamweight this time. Because if he doesn't make bantamweight, he's gone from the UFC. But Renan Barão is fighting Mitch Gagnon. Mitch Gagnon is riding a 4-fight win streak. He does 3 of those wins have been submissions. His last loss was to Brian Caraway at UFC 149. So obviously everybody forgot about that fight because it's Brian Caraway and it's UFC 149. Both of those two things are erased from my mind most days. But Renan Barão, it's a little weird to me because Renan Barão when I say he got beat by TJ Dillashaw at 173, and I was there live for it, and he pretty much had zero offense, and he looks like a bloody, concussed mess after that fight. He just did not know where he was, and they put him in an immediate rematch just 3 days later. I don't think he had enough time to even recover from that beatdown. I mean, his eyes were swollen shut, blood was coming out of his nose, his eyes were going different directions. They put him in a rematch 3 months later, and he passed out cutting weight, hit his head, and got pulled from the fight. I thought he was going to take the rest of the year off, and I wouldn't have blamed him for that. I mean, the UFC they didn't throw him under the bus because what he did to himself. But Dana White obviously didn't do him any favors and by putting him in that interview with Joe Rogan and let Joe Rogan just go to town on him with questions. When Renan Barão looked terrible during that interview, he looked pale. So I thought he was going to take the rest of the year off, but he's coming back. He's fighting Mitch Gagnon. I do think it's a good fight for him to. He should win, and it is in Brazil. I don't think he would have taken a fight outside of Brazil. I do think the travel to Las Vegas to cut weight, I think that did take a toll on him. And then 3 months later, having to fly to Sacramento to cut weight did take a toll on him. I mean, you've heard Nick Diaz talk time and time again about how when he flew to Montreal to fight GSP and he skipped the open workouts to cut all the dirty water out of his system. So I do think cutting weight that far away is obviously more difficult. You'd much rather be cutting weight in your own backyard. So I don't think he would have taken any other fight if it wasn't in Brazil. So but this fight does surprise me that he came back because I thought for sure he was going to take the rest of the year off. But if he wins, I wouldn't be surprised if they just gave him another title shot right away after the winner of Cruz and Dillashaw, and just completely skip over Rafael Assunção, because Assunção didn't do himself any favors with that very weak call-out he did after he beat Brian Caraway.
Yeah, I don't disagree that weight call out didn't do him any favors. But uh, if we're being honest, Henan Brow's still on Dana White's shit list, and he's not getting off there uh, anytime quickly. Two things about this fight. First off, you want to know how far down Henan Brow is on Dana White's shit list? He's fighting Mitch Gagnon. I mean, that's simple. Yeah, he was lucky enough to get the fight in Brazil, but he's fighting Mitch Gagnon. Uh, that's simple. Now,
Well, I think Josh lost signal, so I'll just keep rolling with the breaking news and other fight after Renan Barrao's um, fighting Mitch Gagnon that was announced is Uriah Faber is fighting Francisco Rivera, who is coming off a loss of his own, and I don't really know what to make of this fight because obviously Faber is one of Dana White's needle movers. I think he's outside of Conor McGregor and a now retired BJ Penn. I think he's the biggest needle mover below 155 pounds, and obviously he's wins every single fight outside of the title fights, which is something. I mean, I don't know what's going on with him, but it seems he'll put together a few wins, and regardless of who he beats, he could beat five straight people who are ranked outside of the top 25, and people will still want to see this guy fight. And their reasoning would be, well, he's won five fights in a row, and while it is viable, it so for whatever reason, I just got a text from Josh. His Wi-Fi went down, so I'll just keep rolling. Um, I would have loved to see him fight Rafael Assunção. Rafael Assunção, I believe, is on a 7-fight win streak, and he was supposed to fight Renan Barão 173, but he got hurt. He should be next in line for a title shot, but Dominic Cruz came back with a vengeance and just punched a hole through Takei Mizugaki's head. So you can't deny him the title shot. I would have loved to see Faber versus Assunção, but I do understand why the UFC didn't book it. They need viable contenders in the 135-pound division. And if Faber beats Assunção, that means Faber would obviously most likely be next in line for a title shot. And Josh is back.
I apologize, everyone. Technical difficulties on on my end. What I was saying before I was rudely cut off by Comcast, dirty rats. Uh, anyways, if you want to know what the UFC thinks of Mitch Gagnon and what kind of potential he has, they're putting him in against Embrao in Brazil. He's not even a top 15 fighter. If he wins this fight, I mean, the guy's on the map. Not only is he on the map, he's instantly in the title mix. The UFC could have given this opportunity to many other fighters, but they didn't. They gave it to Mitch. And so I think it really tells a lot about where both fighters sit with the UFC. And if I'm being real honest, I'd much rather be in Mitch's shoes right now than I would Renan Barão's. And I don't know. Depending on how things play out, a victory over Mitch Gagnon, I do not think is going to get Renan another title shot. Not only did he get his ass whooped, like you pointed out, in the first fight, dazed and confused completely, then when he was set to get his immediate rematch, and originally that is not what the UFC was going to do. They were going to go with a Sun South fight, but Renan Barão bitched, moaned, basically said TJ Dillashaw wasn't a man if he didn't accept a rematch in Brazil, of all things. And so the UFC caved, gave him the immediate rematch, and then he pulls that crap where he passes out trying to cut weight, whatever the nonsense was, fell down, bumped his head, Humpty Dumpty style, I don't frickin' know. Seriously, though, I just don't see him getting a title shot. I do think if Dominic Cruz beats TJ Dillashaw, we might be seeing Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber 3, assuming Uriah gets his next victory. Only because that's a fight that fans will always want to see, and if Dominic Cruz is the champion, Dominic has earned a special spot with the UFC, and they'll kind of give him what he wants. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. A lot of stuff going on, though. Jose, what do you think? Anything?
Well, when you cut out, I started to touch upon fate. Like you mentioned, the UFC obviously wants to see Faber Cruz again, and I think fans want to see Faber Cruz for the third time. And I think the UFC's bantamweight division, there are 4 fighters there are 2 needle movers, and I think that is Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz if he fights Uriah Faber. I think Uriah Faber is the only, as Dana White calls them, needle movers below 155 pounds, not named Conor McGregor. If Dominic Cruz fights Uriah Faber, he's a needle mover too, but that's only because of the rivalry. Dillashaw, Barão, Cruz, and Faber are the 4 best fighters in that weight class, I believe, and they could be in that situation where Vitor Belfort, Randy Couture, and Chuck Liddell had back in the day, where they were just all have this merry-go-round where they all just took turns fighting each other for the title. I think Assunção is a fantastic fighter, but he just doesn't sell himself well. He's had some. I think he lost to TJ Dillashaw when they fought, and honestly, that fight with Brian Caraway didn't blow me away. I thought he should have, if he had come out and finished him, I think you could throw Assunção right up in there. But like you said, the UFC wants to see Faber Cruz, and they gave Faber Francisco Rivera, who's coming off a decision loss to Kei Mizugaki. Faber's coming off the win against Bruce Leroy Caceres, so I don't really get. I do kind of get it because I know the UFC wants to protect a contender in Assunção, and they don't want Faber just knocking off another title contender because it's honestly hard to sell Faber as to warrant another title shot for Faber. I mean, he's lost to Barão twice and Cruz in the UFC. He's lost to Aldo in the WEC. So it's in that same boat that Junior and Stipe are in when they fight. If Junior wins, then you lose a title contender. But if Stipe wins, then you can't say no to the title shot. I think if you had Faber and Assunção fight, that'd be in the same boat. Assunção just fought. I think Faber wanted to fight again. But honestly, Faber has come out and said, no one has offered me Assunção. And that shows me the UFC is kind of trying to protect what little title contenders they have at 135 pounds. It's not like middleweight where you have 3 fighters who could very well fight, 3 or 4 fighters waiting in line for the title shot. It's not like lightweight where all 10 fighters in that division could very well see a title shot someday. Bantamweight is very interesting at the top of the weight class. Josh has just got knocked out again, so I'll just keep rolling. Sorry for that, but I think the UFC is trying to protect what little title contenders they have. And Faber versus Assunção, I can't even see that as anything less than a third fight on a card. That could be a Fox Sports 2 main event. That could be a co-main event on a Fox card if it was in California, Faber's hometown. But Assunção I can't imagine Assunção appearing in a pay-per-view main event. I can't see Assunção Dillashaw or Assunção Barão or Assunção Cruz, Assunção Faber ever main eventing a pay-per-view, regardless of who's the champion. He could very well be the best fighter in that division, but I can't possibly see him main eventing a pay-per-view. And Josh is back again, ladies and gentlemen. Uh,
Third
well,
time's the charm. What can I say?
going on what I was saying is I believe, to catch Josh up, I would have loved to see a Sunsao and Faber fight because those are the two fighters in the top 5 that aren't booked up right now. But I think there are so little viable title contenders in the 135-pound weight class that they're trying to protect that what little they have. Faber has come out and said the UFC never offered me a Sunsao. And to me, that just shows me that they don't want Faber to just knock off another contender because it's hard to sell Faber as another, to warrant giving Faber another title shot because he's lost to Cruz in the UFC, he's lost to Brown twice, he's lost to Aldo, he lost to Mike Brown. So it's just hard to sell Faber to give him another title shot after losing that many times, and they don't want a Sunsao to just lose and all of a sudden he's out of the title. It's not like Conor McGregor, where if Conor McGregor loses, he's still going to be in that title talk just because he talks. As soon as Sal loses, he's going to appear on the prelims of a Fox Sports card again because he doesn't sell himself. And they don't want Faber to just knock him off. It's like if Junior beats Stipe, the UFC loses what little heavyweight contenders they have. And if Stipe wins, then you can't say no to a title shot. And I think Asunsao Faber is in that same category, but I think they need to protect what little contenders they have. And Faber said yes to the first person they offered, just like he always does, and gave him Francisco Rivera. And first, Francisco Rivera is 4-1 in the UFC, 10-3 overall. He should have had a 4-fight win streak, but one of them got overturned because he failed the drug test. And he hits hard. I mean, people who just say like he doesn't belong in there are Faber. I'm pretty sure he has 7 knockouts, something like that. So he has some thunder in his fist for 135 pounds. So I would give him a puncher's chance. Faber should win, but it's just a weird matchup. I believe it's the main event of the prelims at UFC 181. So Faber finds himself on the prelims yet again. But honestly, that's not even that big of a deal because when you saw the numbers show that when Faber fought Bruce Leroy at UFC 175, that fight went up to over 1 million viewers for the Faber fight leading into the pay-per-view. And I think that's exactly what the UFC wants to do. They want people to tune in to see Faber, build all the pay-per-view fights, and then those fans will be like, well, I want to buy that now. So I think that's Faber's role in the UFC right now is the fight leading into the pay-per-view just because they know he can sell fights. And they could put him in there with anybody, and he could boost up the Fox Sports ratings. So it doesn't surprise me that Faber took the fight, but the UFC offering Faber Francisco Rivera is a little surprising.
Well, they're not going to offer him a Sunsao because, like you said, when Uriah defeats him, there goes the only other viable title contender that they have. You mentioned all of Uriah's losses. The problem is they're all title fights. The guy does not lose outside of a freaking title fight. And as long as he keeps winning, eventually the UFC is going to have to give him another title shot, or they're going to have to continue to dodge their title contenders. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, I'm just looking at the rankings here. For Uriah Faber, they're not giving him Rafael Sunsao, who's ranked number 4. He's already beat Michael McDonald, who's ranked number 5. He's already beat Mitsugaki at number 6. He's already beat Eddie Weiland at number 7. Yuri Alcantara, I don't know if he's beat him, but he would beat him. So
he beat him at the Boston card.
Thank you. Then you have Johnny Eduardo. Brian Caraway just got his ass handed to him. That leaves Francisco Rivera, And then after that, Alex Bruce Leroy, who Uriah just beat in a very decent fight. So, there's not a whole lot of things that Uriah can do. And so I do think that Uriah finds himself in a pretty interesting position because I think the fans and even the UFC would rather see Uriah Faber, TJ Dillashaw. Fans want to see it because it'd be a good fight. The UFC wants to see it because it would be the benchmark for elite level teammates fighting each other, guys who train together every day, fighting each other for a belt. The UFC could again later in life use that as saying, you know what, don't give me that crap. These guys did it, so can you. So do think that that's an interesting matchup for fans and the UFC. And then obviously, any WEC fan, any UFC fan who truly does like the lighter weight classes wants to see Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz fight again. I personally think Cruz whoops him, but it's irrelevant.
And one thing I want to touch upon that I completely forgot until just now is Faber has already beaten Asun Sao, and that was at featherweight in the WEC days. But that was a very competitive fight. I mean, that wasn't like the usual Uriah Faber WEC fights where he just came in and guillotined everybody. Like that was a he did win by rear naked choke, but it was at like the fourth minute of the third round, and up until that point, it was a very competitive fight. So, and obviously, as soon as I was better, that was a featherweight. So, I think, but that was, I can't remember how long ago that was, but I think you could sell that fight a little bit, but Asun Sao isn't doing himself any favors, and like we both said, they don't want Faber knocking off yet another title contender because he would be in that boat that Benson Henderson was in, where you just keep feeding him these potential contenders, and Benson Henderson just knock him off, or Joseph Benavidez is knocking off all these title contenders. Nobody wants to fight Joseph Benavidez because they understand he's the second best fighter in the division, and they don't want to jeopardize that future title fight, that future title shot, where if they string together a few wins and they give them Benavidez and they lose, then that puts their title shots on hold. So I think Faber's getting beaten for a rough few fights leading into 2015.
The great thing about Uriah is he doesn't care. He's going to fight anybody.
He doesn't care where he fights, when he fights, or where he is on the card.
No, just keep him busy. He's one of those guys. He's like Donald Cerrone. Just keep him busy. That's really all they care about. But the UFC's got so much crap going on. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle everything moving into 2015. And a lot of divisions, if I'm, again, just being honest, they need somebody to step up and start taking the reins and doing some stuff. Otherwise, it's going to be the same tired old shit, and people are going to get tired of seeing it, to be real honest. You can only continue to have the same fights so long before people want to look elsewhere for their entertainment. So the UFC really does need to find these future stars, and obviously they have a couple, and guys like Conor McGregor and whatnot, but at the end of the day, they need more Chael Sonnens.
And if Asun Sao even had half of the charisma that Conor McGregor had, he would have had a title fight 3 fights ago. He would have had that title shot after 4 straight wins. And now we're sitting here, and Asun Sao has 7 straight wins in the UFC. That is unbelievable to think about. That he has one of the longest winning streaks in the entire organization, not just the bantamweight division. And we're here trying to find a reason to give him a title shot. 7 straight wins should be the only reason you need. And he's the obvious, 4th choice for a title shot. And that should just tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, it's horrible because he's beat quality guys in that 7-fight win streak. But I implore anybody to name more than 3. I mean, off the top of my head, I can name TJ Dillashaw, which he didn't win, but, it was in Brazil, so he got credit for the victory. And then, obviously, his past remind you, and again, like I said, the human brain only retains so much information. You know why Chael Sonnen was so great? Because he always told you how great he was. Anytime he got the microphone, he told you how great he was. And not only did he tell you, he sold you on it. He made you believe it. Who cares that he lost to Jeremy Horn 3 times by submission? Nobody. Chael Sonnen sold you on the fact that he was the best in the world, and that Anderson Silva had been dodging him since Chael Sonnen was in the WEC. I mean, seriously, Anderson probably didn't even know who Chael was, but Chael sold the world on that. And Asun Sao can't even can't even, to be real honest, I watched the fight, and Sun Tzu still couldn't probably sell me on the fact that he just beat Brian Caraway. So, you know, it's somebody needs to get in his ear and teach him how to self promote. And if he doesn't do that, he could probably win 12 straight fights. And the UFC is not going to give it to him because it's only media that thinks he deserves a title shot. Ask any random fan out there who Rafael Sun Tzu is, and what? Huh? Is he a soccer player? Is he a baseball player? Nobody cares. Nobody cares, and that's his fault. That's not on us because we're sitting here talking about him. We're boosting him up. He doesn't do anything to help himself. And the other thing, while he is a great fighter, he's not exciting. He doesn't come up with exciting finishes. He doesn't come up with highlight reel KOs or submissions or anything like that. He goes in there, he does his job very effectively. He's very silent about it, and that's not going to get you title shots. All right. Anything else out there for the fans this lovely evening?
Two quick things. I think the two other big news, the biggest news from the past few weeks is the Korean Zombie is going to be sidelined for 2 years. And when I say sidelined, it's not like he's not even going to be he's going to have nothing to do with the UFC for 2 years due to required military service. For those people who don't know, male citizens of South Korea are required to give 2 years of their life to the military. Dong Hyun Kim already did this when he was in his early 20s or late teens. So he was done with it before he even joined the UFC. Korean Zombie got the call, and he has to do it. I mean, he can't say no. It's his duty. He gave an interview today, and somebody said, could you have asked for leniency because you're a professional athlete representing your country? And he said, I didn't even think about that because when you're a kid and you're born in South Korea, you know this is coming. It's your duty, and he is disappointed. He has to fight. He has to miss 2 more years of fighting. He accepts it. He knew it was coming, and he's a little disappointed it came now, but there's nothing he can do. And when I say military service, I'm like, he's not going to be in the front lines with guns. He's not going to be fighting ISIS or like trying to invade North Korea. He's going to have a cushy desk job where he can work from home, and he can still train. He can still roll BJJ. He can still kickbox and spar. He just can't fight because he has a full-time desk job. And 2 years away, he'll return. And he said that the silver lining is he gets to heal because for those who don't remember, we saw his arm dislodged basically from his body in his last fight against Jose Aldo at UFC 163 last August. So August 2013, he lost. He hasn't fought since. He was supposed to fight Akira Corsani in Sweden. His shoulder, he re-injured his shoulder, so he had to pull out. So that'll be basically 3.5 years of no fighting for him. And it's a real shame because he is easily one of the most exciting fighters, pound for pound, in the entire UFC. He has 2 submission of the years, a fight of the year, two fight of the years, 2 submission of the years, and he's tied for the UFC record for fastest knockout in promotional history. So it is a shame that we're going to be losing the Korean Zombie for 2 more years of his prime fighting years.
Yeah, it is disappointing because I certainly love the Korean Zombie. He's an exciting fighter. He's a great fighter. And one of the things I do want to point out, though, I did do a little research on this. The Korean Zombie is basically getting the same treatment that they do with their Olympic athletes. And so instead of putting them in the front lines where they would see actual active duty, that we would call it, he does get to do his service from behind the desk. Now, someone like myself living in South Korea who's not a world famous athlete, I wouldn't have that same option. It would be up to the random draw that they. It's not like they're just completely screwing them. It is a part of their culture. Everybody has to do it, and they're giving him the same treatment that they do with all of their professional athletes that represent their country. So it sucks, but every culture is different, and kudos to the Korean Zombie for sticking up for what his culture believes in. Because to be real honest, he's not bitching about it. He says, yeah, it sucks that he has to miss UFC and miss fighting and that kind of stuff. But never once has he come out and said, this sucks. It sucks that I have to, serve in the military. It sucks that this is what my culture dictates. He's never once said anything like that. So kudos to him for backing up his cultural beliefs. I think that's excellent. And you know, if he ever does come back to fighting, I look forward to seeing him.
The only the only other thing that this couldn't have come at a worse time for the UFC because I do believe they're going to try and hold an event in South Korea sometime mid 2015, and I'm pretty sure he was supposed to be the headlining act. So this couldn't have same thing. Cain Velasquez gets hurt, leading to Mexico. Korean Zombie out for 2 years, right before they head to South Korea.
Well, it is what it is. But again,
Agreed.
like I said, the UFC is resilient. They're a billion-dollar company. They'll figure out a way to bounce back. I think they'll be all right. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the evening. I do apologize for all of the technical difficulties this evening. I'll make sure that I have that addressed because we are coming back to you tomorrow night, immediately following Tough. It'll be, what I think, 11 o'clock on the East Coast, 10 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone, and 8 o'clock if you're on the West Coast. So definitely make sure that you tune in for that. Then we will be coming back immediately following UFC 179 with a recap of the event. So you have predictions tomorrow night, you have recap Saturday night. In the meantime, if there's anything that you missed, go to the MMAcorner.com. We got you covered. Everything that you need for your MMA needs is at the MMAcorner.com, your home for all things MMA. As always, I want to thank my sponsors, our sponsors for the show. Battle Bomb, the only pain the only pain reliever with the knockout power. BattleBomb.com, definitely check them out. And Bony Asai, halfway down on the MMAcorner.com, click on Vitor Belfort's face. All your Bony Asai products are right there. For Jose Youngs, I'm Josh Davis. We'll see you tomorrow night. Peace out.